How are we doing? All right. I'm going to close this out here, all right? So stay with me. So I'm here, once this presentation gets on, to say that only creativity can get us out of the trouble that we're in right now. And guys, we're in big trouble. There's big stuff going on, and we've got to tackle it. So only creativity can get us out of this. What do I mean by this? This is what I mean by this. Globally, anxiety is up with everybody, all populations. Globally, confidence is down. And it's driven by big things and small things. Small things like the cost of food and gas, relatively small. Really, really big things like the existential threat of climate change. We've also got personal finances. We've got things like job automation. Am I going to have a job in the future? And of course, things like the political environment. So bad, in fact, that CBC News recently reported that 72% of Canadians are worried about the future or somewhat worried about the future. A really big number if you really think about the weight that society has to carry with that worry in all of our brains. On top of that, literally the lungs of the earth are on fire as we speak, and we can't, as a global population, figure ourselves out to come together and help that rainforest issue and ultimately help the climate along. Huge issue. So, only creativity can get us out of this. That's the this. Here's what I mean by creativity. I really like this definition. It's about bringing good things into the world that otherwise wouldn't exist. It's about the noble act of pushing back the darkness and bringing hope to despair. I really like that. For me, a little wordy. To me, what I would say is creativity, simply put, is applied optimism. It's the idea that there's a better thing out there, and that if we are smart and choiceful in the way that we design towards it, we can get to better. And the good thing is, creativity is good in a lot of different ways. It's good for the economy. In 2015 alone, over $500 billion was contributed to the global economy through the creative economy. So we like that. It's good for the environment as well. I really like this quote. It talks a lot about the sort of existing generations and future generations and what we can do in terms of getting to better practices for people and for culture and for ultimately the planet, and ultimately getting to a more sustainable development path into the future. I mean, we need to look absolutely no further than Greta. She's 16, she's from Sweden, and not only has she now recently created the biggest movement and some of the biggest strikes ever on climate, she's actually mobilized the universe in the biggest way possible on any topic in the last many hundreds of years. So big shout to Greta. So that's a big act. Greta, massive, millions and millions of people. Check out her Instagram, follow her, please, 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 and get involved. Small act. This is a little grocery store in Vietnam that instead of using single-use plastic to wrap their fruits and veg, what they said is, why don't we use banana leaf? Why don't we get rid of that plastic? Why don't we stop it from ending up in the oceans, and we'll talk about that later, and actually get to a more sustainable, progressive, and super affordable solution. Big acts and small acts matter. Creativity is also good for our health. According to Forbes and Medical News, what's really cool is it increases your actual happiness. The actual act of being creative helps being more happy. It reduces the onset of dementia, which is super cool. It improves mental health. It boosts your immune system. And ultimately, again, being creative or leveraging creativity makes you smarter. So it's actually good for you. It's good for you as a mom or a dad, a parent, somebody at work, a brother, a cousin, a sister, or a brother. Creativity is good for our health. This is probably why we're seeing stuff like this. On the left, we've got a adult coloring book. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. Super cool. Really, really sort of tunes you out, and it gets you into a different mental state that we'll talk about. Lego jumped on board in the middle. That's Forma, which is literally Lego for adults. How cool is that? And they got cooler structures than all the stuff that the kids like, which is awesome. Also, escape rooms. If you've been doing an escape room, it's the same sort of idea, which is how do you put people together and challenge them to come up with a solution? And you have to use a different part of your brain to get there. So it's good for your health. Perhaps at the risk of overstating it, also it's the most important skill in the world. And I'm not making this up, just being a guy that works in a creative industry. This is according to the World Economic Forum. So look on the right side here, declining. What are the declining skills of 2022 moving forward? You got things like manual dexterity, understanding memory, management of financial and material resources. You got things like coordination, time management, technology use, etc. Those are all going away, according to really, really smart people. What's on the up? We've got things like analytical thinking, creativity, complex problem solving, ideation. Creativity is literally the future not only of work, as we heard earlier today, but it's actually good for you personally as you try to sort of create new realities for your family and yourself. And frankly, it's the last skill to be automated. I run an advertising agency. I automate absolutely everything I can. I automate all sorts of stuff through machine learning, artificial intelligence, programmatic advertising buying, all that sort of stuff. But I can't automate my creatives. I can't automate my strategists. So it's an investment in the future. Creativity is good for what's next. So to geek out on the brain piece for a second, how does creativity actually happen? Well, the first thing that happens is you release dopamine in your brain. And you need both of these things, by the way, for this to work. Dopamine first, which is sort of in your brain what you would think of as a rewards drug. It's sort of what feels like I've done something good. Also, you need serotonin, which is sort of the happy chemical. And only when those two things happen can you get a beautiful picture like that, seemingly with either bees or butterflies flying around it. But that's how creativity happens. You need both of those things to work. And so actually, literally your brain looks different and is working differently depending on what mode you're in. If you're on the low creative network side, you're probably like most of us most days where you're getting through your to-do list, right? You're just getting through your day. You're looking at your calendar. Where do I have to go next? I got to go shopping. I got to go pick up the kids from school. That's a very sort of task-oriented brain function. To get to the high creative network on the other side, that's a very, very different way for your brain to work, where you release yourself of all those pressures and you are working on what's next and inventing and thinking about new things and complex problem solving, as I said. And so if you're like me, that's probably why you have some of your most brilliant ideas while you're taking a shower. Because you've released yourself of your to-do list. That's the moment where you can say absolutely nothing to yourself, stand there and let creativity happen. So what's really cool is that creativity ultimately looks at impossible and says, bullshit. I can get through this. And what's really, really cool is we've got a very interesting local example of that. So first of all, Side Launch, delicious beer. I'm sure almost everybody knows about it. I love it. Drink it all the time. Maybe Creemore Springs a little bit more. We can talk about that later after the after party. But still a good beer. What's almost cooler than the beer itself is actually the origin story, which is this. Which is, as a part of the Second World War, we were in Collingwood asked to build 32 ships. And even though we've got this gigantic southern Georgian bay, actually where the shipbuilding operation was close to a very narrow harbor. And the belief was that we actually couldn't launch the ships in first, or rather from the front, or rather from the back. You had to do it sideways. And so we were one of the only harbors in North America that made that impossible possible, and hence Side Launch beer, which is very cool. So good for all of our predecessors. So here's the theme. What's up? Give me a sense today for why are we excited? What's possible in the future? We're not talking about what's down. We're talking about what's coming. And what I like about creativity as an answer to that is that it's not just an answer to a problem. Creativity can also be a sense of hope. It can be a sense of connection. It can bring us together. It can give us a sense of why we could cope with what the reality of is today and move forward. It can certainly provoke, and we're going to show you an example or two of that. And perhaps most importantly, creativity is contagious. So if you've got one moment of creativity happening, you can see others and inspire others, and maybe those 2 people can inspire 5 people, and maybe those 5 people can inspire 10 people, and then 100 people. So creativity really matters, and it's really, really contagious if we get it right. So a couple of pieces from around the world that really inspire me, and hopefully you as well. This is an artist group in the South Sudan called Anataban, and quite literally that translates to I am tired. And so this is just an amazing artist group that said, we're going to use art to say no more. No more to the violence where we live. No more to letting this go on any longer. And it's a simple and defiant and beautiful act to do that. Beautiful act of creativity. I'm sure many of us have seen this. This is on the border of the southern United States. This is a super cool collection of a very cool architectural firm in Mexico and a professor from UC Berkeley. And what they decided to come together and say is, well, listen, there's a gigantic steel wall there, and it's creating a real sense of otherness. What would we do to ask a different question and present the people on both sides of the border in a very different light and reframe the discussion in a really important way? It's amazing what just a couple of pink teeter-totters can do. Super, super cool. This is an amazing piece, back to sort of the climate and environmental piece. So obviously with Al Gore involved, it's a super big deal, but they had to design to get him into it. So what this is a bunch of artists said, listen, there's multiple islands of plastic in the middle of the ocean, and nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a shit because it's actually not one country's problem. So they said, well, let's go pore over the rules of the UN and figure out what it means to be a country. And they said, oh, wait, we can actually pledge the UN and say we are a country, we are called the Trash Isles, and we need everybody on board to recognize us as a country so that somebody finally, one country, many countries, will come together to do something about it. And they didn't just do a press release, which is what so often happens with these sort of PR stunts. They went all the way. They did an official passport. They did a flag. They made their own currency for the Trash Isles. Incredible. You can literally have Trash Isles money. And what's so cool about that is then they actually got the attention that they deserved on the floor of the UN, and things are finally starting to slowly happen here. But you can see how creativity absolutely changed the conversation here. My agency has the privilege of working with the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, Sick Kids as many would know it, on a really ambitious goal of the next, now, year and a half, but was once 5 years, which is we need to raise $1.3 billion to get a new hospital built. And so we needed to do all sorts of things in a brand new way to attract all sorts of new donors and show up as a brand in an entirely new way. Why I make the case for creativity with this particular piece, which is the launch film from year one, is that we needed to make a big strategic shift, which is the category forever, and frankly, charities for almost all of time, have thought about sick children as weak. And this idea that just lob $20 over and hopefully little Timmy will live another day. And we said, no, that's not true. They're little warriors. And how do we honor that? And how do we bring that spirit to the Sick Kids Foundation? So this is our year one launch anthem.
Last time I freaked out and ain't been high since. I'm on the fence, shorty tryna send a rinse, but how I'm gon' get caught when I don't even got brakes? You don't gotta lose a top, you don't even got hits. So I'm praying that this creepy bus driver don't glimpse I'm rolling. You would think my whip was stolen. In my past life I hit up all that in your pills and I'm swollen like I hit a beehive with a Boeing 737 with my arms to the heavens like drop zone till the block's gone. Can't you tell we ran up out of options? This ain't a choir group, tell the entire truth and let it set you free. We undeniable. We undeniable. We undeniable. We undeniable. This ain't a choir group, tell the entire truth and let it set you free. We undeniable. We undeniable. Tell the entire truth and let it set you free. We undeniable. We undeniable.
And for those keeping up with the fight, we're 75% of the way to $1.3 billion. We're going to get the hospital done. So simply put, guys, we need more creativity in the world. And there's something about this quote that I love so much. Albert's got it right, which is that it's actually in all of us. As long as you've got some intelligence, which hopefully I can presume everybody here does. I think we're good there, right? It's just letting that loose and having a bit of fun with it. And, you know, there's this sort of outdated conception of, like, what is a creative? And you so often think about, like, some moody, cool scene with somebody in a dark room on a leather couch, probably with, like, a black turtleneck, and they're smoking a cigarette. And I say, I actually think that there's creativity in all of us. So actually, I want to do, if I could get the tech group's help here, any light that's possible in the room, I'd like to flood the theater as much as possible. And I would quite literally like you to stand up so I'm not kidding here, if you have ever made a handmade birthday card, stand up. Guys, we're supposed to make it take longer. Shit. All right. If you've ever had solved a problem at work, stand up for the 3 people who haven't. If you've ever planted a garden, put your hand in the air. If you've ever gone off recipe when cooking, even if it didn't work out. If you've ever bent logic to get your kid to do something, which I did yesterday morning. I feel like a preacher, this is getting a bit weird. And finally, if there's like one weird person in the back that's never done any of this, if you've ever been a kid, make sure you please stand up. And obviously what we see is creativity is in everybody. And given the theme of what's next, what's our causes for optimism, I would just ask all of you to leave this theater today and be creative. Thank you very much.